We begin tonight with breaking news out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. A 51-year-old woman dead in her bed from a single gunshot wound to the head. The perpetrator, her 23-year-old husband. The young hubby tells police his wife's death was, well, it was all an accident. A sex fantasy game gone wrong. He claims he didn't know the gun was loaded when he pressed it to his wife's head during their fantasy sex game. The husband, a self-proclaimed gun expert, owning several different types of guns, calls 911 after he shoots his wife in the head. Was this really a sex game gone wrong? Or is this just an elaborate, twisted story to get away with murder? Let us go straight out to Nicole Parton, investigative reporter. Nicole, walk us through. You weren't there, but Nicole, walk us through what he says happened.
Good evening, Jean. It was on the evening of December the 21st, about 9 p.m., that the 911 call came in. 23-year-old Arthur Sadil calls 911, says he has accidentally shot his 50-year-old wife, Rebecca Sadil, during a fantasy sex game. He explains that he grabbed a weapon from the bedside shelf, racked the slide, cocking the gun, held the gun to his wife's head during a sex act fantasy game. The gun went off, tragically killing his wife. It's very common knowledge that Arthur was very much a self-proclaimed lover of guns and weapons. His Facebook page portrays that. His friends knew that.
Well, to Steve Kardian, former police detective, self-defense expert, and lead instructor at Defend University, joining us tonight from New York. Anybody that has been raised with guns knows the cardinal rule. Every gun is loaded. I don't care if it has a safety on, if it doesn't have a safety on, if it doesn't have a safety at all, if it's loaded, if it's unloaded, it's loaded. That's the respect you give to a gun.
Absolutely, Gene. And I actually have a weapon here. It's an unloaded weapon. It is a real gun, likely like the one that was perhaps used. Now, this gun is unloaded. It is safe. There is no magazine nor bullets in there. I'm going to chamber this gun.
Steve, let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
Let me read what the probable cause affidavit says. You can walk us through it. Okay, This is what this young man who's been arrested now, arresting charges, first-degree murder, he said he racked the slide back, causing the gun to cock, and then placed the gun to his wife's head, and it went off. Okay, show us that he racked the slide back. Start from that beginning.
Good. Here is the weapon. There would be one of two ways that he would likely do it. He would grab the slide here and rack it back. That would chamber around. Now, this has a distinctly different sound, unloaded, than it does loaded. So the other way that he may do that is to cock the gun here, pull the slide back, and chamber the round. Now, if there were a bullet in there, there would be a mechanic that the slide would drag the bullet into that chamber, into the barrel, and it would feel completely different than it does unloaded.
So you're saying that when you rack the slide back and cock that gun, you know right then and there if that gun is loaded or if it isn't loaded by the feel?
Any expert, any person that handles guns on a regular basis knows the feeling. It's a significant difference in weight when the gun is loaded than when it's not loaded. When you chamber the round in an empty gun is a metallic sound. There's no mechanism of engaging that bullet into the barrel. It's significantly different. Any expert would know the difference, irregardless of what he was doing handling that gun.
I'm Jean Casares of In Session, in for Nancy Grace tonight. A 23-year-old husband, a 50-year-old wife. He says that they played this game all the time, and the gun was on the shelf. It was a twisted sex game, and he put it to her temple, and it went off. And it was loaded, and he didn't know it was loaded. To Steve Kardian, former police detective, joining us tonight from New York. All right, here's what I want to know. The handgun you have, which is much like we believe the handgun that was used, I want you to show us, how do you load that gun?
All right. I would take the gun, and I would open the slide, and I would lock it. I would lock it in place. I would insert the magazine, which has no bullets in it, in here, and hammer it in. I would then disengage this. Now, that would load and chamber a bullet. If the magazine is empty, interesting enough, when I bring the slide back, it locks into place. So most every semi-automatic pistol that I'm aware of operates in this fashion.
All right, here's my question. Is there any way that latent prints that you can find on that gun, not only from pulling the trigger, because he doesn't say that in the probable cause affidavit that he pulled the trigger, but can you find any prints from when the gun was loaded? And I know you can't tell the age of them, but could that help to show that he loaded the gun?
Yeah, but at what time did he? So it could have been that he loaded it, unloaded it, perhaps. But I think the case is going to be solved ballistically and forensically. He's got a story. Forensically, the ballistics experts are going to try and match up that story, and if that doesn't jive, he's got a big problem.
But if you can find that he purchased some bullets, which in many cases you find that, and you find the receipt, and then you corroborate that with some latent prints that you have found, you are building your circumstantial case.
Yes, absolutely. And I doubt that there's going to be anyone that's going to not believe that he didn't load that weapon. And very likely that's what they're going to do. They will examine those bullets so that there's no contradiction on his behalf that she loaded the weapon. So yes, they will look for latent prints on the bullets that are in that weapon or the bullet that was ejected from that gun. We
are taking your calls live tonight. Sheba in Illinois. Good evening, Sheba.
Hey, good evening, Gene. I just want to say your expert witness is great. He said everything I was going to say. I've been around guns all my life.
To Steve Kardian, former police detective, joining us tonight from New York. All right, you have a gun unloaded completely, but it is similar to the gun we believe was used. Talk to us about what this young man says that he did, that he racked the slide back, causing the gun to cock, put it on the head of his wife, and then it went off. Show us how that is done.
When the gun would be, even if there was the magazine was entered into the gun, he's got to slide that back. Now, the mechanics are that this slide, once it's released, is going to catch a bullet. And that's going to have a significant different feel. It's going to be notable, especially to someone who's claiming to be an expert in the handling of weapons.
So he had to use both hands doing this?
Yes, he had to use both hands to engage the slide, to bring it back, and to load that weapon. And the sound that you're hearing is completely different than the sound that's going to be made if there are bullets and a magazine in this weapon.
And what's the difference in the sound if it is a loaded gun versus unloaded when you do all that?
You're going to hear the chamber. You're going to hear the slide is going to capture the bullet right here. As a matter of fact, you see it when the gun is open. So this slide, when it goes forward, it's going to now capture that bullet and engage it into the barrel. It's a completely different feel than it is when the gun is loaded as opposed to when the gun is empty.
All right, to Jeff Kardian, psychologist and contributor to healthguru.com. Wife, 50 years old. Husband, 23 years old. I know it happens, I know, but what does a 23-year-old man have in common with a 50-year-old woman?
Usually just sex. So I am surprised that this is a situation of where supposedly they were in love. Now, Gene, I have to tell you this, and I know there may be some criticism of it, but when you're dealing with a 23-year-old young man and a 50-year-old woman, it is very easy for that relationship to be pathological. And now we're hearing that he prepared all their meals, he virtually took care of her in a way that we see many marriages husbands don't, driving to her job. So what this tells me is that there was a lot of possessiveness here, obsessiveness, perhaps too much intensity in this relationship, and then you throw in the sex play, and so I kind of smell a rat here.
That is fascinating what you say right there. To Steve Kardian, a former detective joining us tonight from New York. All right, I want to look at that gun again because this is much like the gun that we believe was used. And this young man, Arthur Sadil, says it was an accident. I want to talk about the trigger pull. You got to pull the trigger, don't you?
You do. And unless it's a worked up gun, the trigger pull is going to be about 7, 8 pounds. If it's worked on, it could be as low as 3. So, yeah, it needs a significant amount of pressure to shoot that gun, depending upon whether the gun has been worked or was a target pistol.
All right, now here's my question. If you believe the gun isn't loaded, that's your state of mind, the gun is not loaded, why would you rack the slide back, causing the gun to cock? Why would you do that?
To engage a bullet into the chamber of the gun.
But it's unloaded. You're playing. This is a playtime.
Yeah, if that was sexual play for them, and he believed that the gun was unloaded, perhaps he used it for effect. But hard to buy, Gene.
All right, that is right. All right, we want to thank everybody tonight.